$4 million Bugatti Chiron per sport, 8 car brands inside it, and Matt Armstrong just exposed every single one of them. Not 8 suppliers, not 8 component manufacturers that nobody has ever heard of, 8 brands you recognize.
I've never drove a Chiron before, and that being my first ever Chiron to drive, what an experience that was. We're so close.
Brands that make cars costing a fraction of what this Bugatti costs. Audi, Aston Martin, Honda, Volkswagen, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, Lamborghini, and Amazon. Yes, Amazon. An 11-pound bull from Amazon Prime is holding part of the most exclusive hypercar in the world together right now, and the Bugatti drove on it. And nobody at Bugatti can say a single thing about it, because 5 of those 8 brands were not Matt Armstrong sourcing. 5 of them were Bugatti's own supply chain, components that Bugatti's engineers chose during design and production, because the parts did the job, because the specification matched, and because the information about which non-exclusive components were inside the car was something Bugatti never expected anyone to find, until Matt Armstrong started removing parts and reading the numbers on them. And now that information is public, permanent, on YouTube, forever. Think about what that list actually means, because it is easy to hear 8 brands and process it as a curiosity, an interesting detail, a fun fact about how hypercars are actually built that most people do not know. But the list is not a curiosity. It is a demolition, a complete, specific, part-by-part demolition of the single most important argument Bugatti made throughout the entire Matt Armstrong conflict. The argument that their parts are so unique, so exclusively designed, so specifically engineered for the specific car that sourcing them independently was impossible. That the authorized supply chain was not just a preferred path for parts, but the only path. That the reason parts could not be purchased through independent channels was not about corporate control, but about the genuine impossibility of finding anything outside a network that would meet the specification the car demanded. That argument is now in pieces. 8 pieces, 1 for each brand on the list. And the 11-pound Amazon Bolt is the piece that breaks the argument beyond any possible reassembly. But before we go through every brand on the list and what each one reveals about Bugatti's supply chain and the argument they made about it, we need to understand how Matt Armstrong found this information. Because the finding is as important as the finding. The method is as significant as the result. And the method was disarmingly simple. He removed the parts. He read the numbers on them. He cross-referenced those numbers against parts databases that are publicly available to anyone with an internet connection and the patience to use them. No hacking, no industrial espionage, no insider information from a disgruntled Bugatti employee. Just a man in a workshop removing components from a car. He was rebuilding and looking at what was written on them. That is it. That is how the most shocking parts revelation in automotive YouTube history happened. Someone read the numbers. And Bugatti, who has been spending years in corporate energy and CEO Instagram time maintaining the mystique of an exclusive part supply chain that only they control, never considered that the answer to their mystique was sitting on the outside of every component in the car waiting for someone to look. Now let us go through the list. All 8, one by one. Because each brand on this list tells a specific story and adds a specific piece to the picture of what a Bugatti Chiron per sport actually is beneath the carbon fiber and the horseshoe grille and the $4 million price tag. Audi A3, passenger airbag. This is the one the internet already knew about. The cross-compatibility that Matt Armstrong used early in the rebuild when Bugatti parts were unavailable and Audi A3 airbags turned out to be fully compatible. The detail that the internet briefly lost its mind about before someone explained the Volkswagen Group supply chain and the sharing of safety components across the group's vehicles. But the audience's reaction to the Audi A3 airbag story was based on a misunderstanding. They thought Matt Armstrong had made a compromise, that he had fitted a lesser component to fill a gap that a proper Bugatti part would have filled if Bugatti had been willing to supply it. The truth is more interesting than that. There is no specifically Bugatti airbag. There never was. The airbag in a Chiron comes from the same supply chain as the airbag in an Audi A3. Bugatti's engineers chose that component during design because it met the specification, because it did the job, And the $4 million price premium on the car does not include a $4 million airbag. It includes an Audi A3 airbag in a car with a $4 million everything else. Aston Martin. Steering wheel squib, the component that connects the airbag and the steering wheel to the electrical system that deploys it in a crash. An Aston Martin steering wheel squib inside a Bugatti Chiron, found by Matt Armstrong through the same cross-reference process. The part number on the component matching an Aston Martin part number in the publicly available database. And here's where the story gets more complicated than the simple narrative of Bugatti using other brands' parts. Because Aston Martin and Bugatti do not share a parent company the way Audi and Volkswagen do. They are not group siblings. They are competitors. Independent manufacturers at the same level of the premium market. And Bugatti using an Aston Martin squib is not a group supply chain decision. It is a market procurement decision. A decision that the specification of the Aston Martin component matched what the Chiron steering wheel airbag system required, and that sourcing it was the appropriate solution, which means that if Matt Armstrong needed an Aston Martin steering wheel squib for the Chiron rebuild, the part is findable. It is not behind a Bugatti exclusive supply chain. It is behind an Aston Martin part number. And Aston Martin parts are considerably more accessible than Bugatti parts. Honda Civic. 10 radiator cores. This one requires a moment, because the Honda Civic is not a car that occupies the same mental universe as the Bugatti Chiron in most people's minds. The Honda Civic is a reliable, practical, affordable family car sold in millions to people who need dependable transportation. The Bugatti Chiron is a $4 million hypercar produced in tens to people who want the ultimate expression of automotive performance. They share a radiator core specification. 10 of them. The Bugatti Chiron has 10 radiators because the thermal management requirements of a W16 engine with 4 turbochargers producing nearly 1,500 horsepower demand 10 radiators. And the cores of those 10 radiators meet the same specification as Honda Civic radiator cores. The engineering detail that Matt Armstrong noted alongside this finding is one of the most interesting technical details in the entire part story. The Honda Civic radiator cores have 73 fins. Bob's custom-built replacement cores have 75 fins, 2 extra fins per core, across 10 radiators. A small, specific, engineering upgrade and a handmade replacement that the factory specification did not include, because the builder understood what the car needed and added what it did not have. Bob built better radiators than Honda, and Honda's specification was good enough for Bugatti. Volkswagen Passat, secondary air pump. This one is different from the others in a specific way that Matt Armstrong noted, and that deserves to be understood clearly, because the Volkswagen Passat air pump is not a component that Bugatti used because Volkswagen Group supply chain sharing made it the convenient choice. It is a component that was retrofitted to address a specific emissions requirement, a secondary air pump added to the Chiron to meet modern emissions standards. And the decision to use a Volkswagen Passat secondary air pump in that retrofit was a practical engineering decision. The component met the specification. It fit the application. And it cost a fraction of what a purpose-built Bugatti-specific solution would have cost, which means that somewhere in the history of this specific car, or in the history of this specific compliance requirement, a Bugatti engineer looked at the Volkswagen Passat parts catalog and found exactly what they needed. And now Matt Armstrong found it by removing the part and reading the number. Porsche, front crash sensors. The crash sensors that tell the car's safety system the collision has occurred and trigger the deployment sequence for every safety system the car contains. Porsche sensors. Found cross-reference to Porsche part numbers in the database. And here is the specific significance of the Porsche sensors in the context of this rebuild. The crash sensor wiring was one of the faults that Matt Armstrong found in the warning light forest on the first drive day. The broken crash sensor wiring that needed soldering before the warning lights would clear, and sorting that wiring, understanding what it connected to and why it had broken, and what needed to be done to fix it, was a process that the Porsche part number cross-reference made significantly more accessible. Because Porsche crash sensor wiring documentation and Porsche crash sensor specifications are available in ways that Bugatti-specific documentation is not. And the cross-reference turned a potentially weeks-long sourcing problem into a solvable one. The Porsche part number did not just expose Bugatti's supply chain. It made the rebuild easier. Mercedes-Benz. Pyrofuse. This is the most significant brand on the list. Not the most surprising. Not the most embarrassing. The most significant. Because the Mercedes-Benz pyrofuse is not a component that Matt Armstrong found and sourced as a substitute for an unavailable Bugatti part. It is a component that Bugatti installed at the factory. Their engineers chose a Mercedes-Benz pyrofuse for the battery interruption system of the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport. And they never told anyone. The pyrofuse was a component that needed replacing on the first drive day. The battery interruption igniter that had been triggered by the crash and could not be reset. The part that needed to be sourced that day before the first drive could happen. And the reason that part was sourceable that day, the reason first drive did not have to wait weeks for a Bugatti-specific component to arrive through channels that were not available to Matt Armstrong anyway because of the VIN lock, is that the part is a Mercedes-Benz pyrofuse. And Mercedes-Benz parts, unlike Bugatti parts, can be sourced through a wide range of independent suppliers on short notice without a factory authorization code. Bugatti chose a Mercedes part. That choice made the rebuild faster. And Bugatti will not enjoy that particular irony. Lamborghini Gallardo. Fuse board, the electrical distribution component that manages the fusing of the car's electrical circuits. Lamborghini Gallardo, not current Lamborghini. Gallardo, the model that was in production from 2003 to 2013. A car that has been out of production for over a decade. And the fuse board specification of that car matches a component in the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport. The significance of this finding goes beyond the simple revelation that Bugatti used a Lamborghini component. It goes to the question of availability. Because Gallardo parts